Okay, Bob Bianchi of the Law&Crime Network, and to our Sirius XM listeners, welcome. I have with us a law enforcement expert, Vincent Hill. We're going to continue to break this case down. We're at a break right now in the Shawn Grate trial. That is the case where this defendant was convicted of having murdered brutally, leaving the corpses inside his house, 2 women, and a 3rd woman who was the kidnapped victim and raped by him, who actually got away. We were listening to the 911 call about that. We are literally listening to pieces of her testimony while we're on break. But I wanted to just throw to Vincent for a while a question. As a law enforcement guy, Vincent, you've had occasion to actually be on the witness stand to have people like me either ask you questions or cross-examine you, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Actually, I felt like I was just doing it right now, right? Is that a fact? Isn't that true? And you, I think, come from a unique perspective. It is my opinion as a trial lawyer that there is not enough work done in when you're asked to give an expert opinion about something. That is where you can actually go beyond the facts as an expert witness, and based on your training and experience, you're allowed to offer an opinion. That sometimes you kind of get left out there without them giving you kind of like what the defense is going to hit you with. And I don't know, have you ever experienced a scenario where you don't think you were properly prepared and you paid a price for it? Understand?
Absolutely. And of course the defense, their job is to trash anything you've done. They're going to question everything, right? They want to question your notes. They want to question everything you did at that crime scene from start to finish. Anyone you talk to, what time did you talk to them, everything is questionable when you're that investigator, that officer, and you're on the stand and you're trying to present your case, your probable cause to say why you made that arrest.
You know, another thing I like to talk to you about is, and this is kind of interesting, we used to get into a little bit of what I would call friction between the legal side and the law enforcement side and the prosecutor's office. And we had, just so people understand this, most prosecutors' offices actually have a law enforcement side, what we call the gun and badge side. And then you have your attorneys who are the assistant prosecutors or assistant district attorneys that are bringing the case to trial. And there would always be tension within the office because the lawyers would always seem to want more. I want more evidence. I want more witness statements. I want more. You're smiling. I could see you already. You know what I'm talking about. Or when you're dealing with the local police agency. And one of the reasons why I was very heavy on lawyer involvement in the investigative stage is because ultimately the lawyers have to, the prosecutors have to prove the case in the courtroom. And while a cop may, and I'm curious of your experience with this, I have found, especially in murder cases, there may be a lot of high-fiving that goes on when they get the target to say, yes, I did it. But you may find lawyers asking more, like why, and making sure they get rid of defenses like passion provocation or manslaughter and ask you to go back and do more. Has that been your experience, and have you experienced that tension that may go on between both sides?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, because an admission of guilt is not proof of guilt itself, right? I could easily walk in and say, yes, I killed this person, but when you take that to court, the jury's going to want to hear, well, why did you do it? What was the motive? Did this person have history with their victim? They want to know all of that. So yes, investigators, we get in the habit of, yes, I got that confession. Yes, let's high five. Let's go have a drink. But there's more to it, as you know, when it goes to court.
Yeah, I think this case illustrates that a little bit, but I'm thinking of many scenarios, especially in the context of a domestic violence homicide or husband and a wife scenario, where the passion provocation defense is often used. And passion provocation is just a quick way of saying that it's a legitimate, lawful provocation that would cause a reasonable person, I'm just giving spitball and some quick law here, to kill another person. And what psychologists like this gentleman who's on the stand in the Grate trial, or any other trial for that matter, want to do is look at conduct-oriented behavior. That is the thing that's going to really say, was the person under the stress of the mental event, or were they thinking deliberately and consciously? So what's happening just before the actual physical homicide itself or right afterwards can be very relevant, and that's why it's important that law enforcement gets the answers to those questions. Vincent, we have to cut it off a little bit. I think we're back in court listening to the testimony of the doctor who is testifying on behalf of Shawn Grate in an attempt to spare his life. Hi, welcome back to the Law&Crime Network. I got Vincent Hill with me, my law enforcement expert, and we have just been kind of in amazement. Now, this needs to end so me and Vincent can start talking about what it is that we're seeing here, but Listen, Vincent, I've learned an axiom about expert witnesses, and you do not go into redirect examination unless you have something really compelling to bring out. I think it's kind of lackluster. The prosecutor, we were talking offset about the idea that I hope he stops because he did a really, really good job, and he did. Let's go to the last line that the prosecutor gave. I have it down here. The last thing he said at the end was he said, oh, the defendant is ready for lethal injection. Yes, he did, and he sat down. Very compelling. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Shawn already knows what his fate has in store for him. What else do you say to that?
Yeah, I just think that, one of the things as a trial lawyer that you try to do is try to make sure you go and you try to emphasize what it is that's most impactful to a jury. I thought that was great. Listen, we're at the Shawn Grate trial. We're at the penalty phase right now. This is where he was convicted of 2 women being killed, 1 woman being abducted, kidnapped, who actually solved the case. We're literally listening to the redirect examination of the psychiatric expert on behalf of the defendant. We're going to go to a quick commercial break and get you right back into that courtroom. Hi, I'm Bob Bianchi for the Law&Crime Network. Welcome to our Sirius XM viewers. I'm here with Vincent Hill, our law enforcement expert. We are listening to the Shawn Grate trial in the death penalty phase, where the jury is going to make a determination as to life or death. The expert witness I see is actually walking out of the courtroom right now. That was the expert for the defense, the psychologist that was talking about why his life should be spared. They're just going over some business right now in court. So let's take some advantage of some of this, Vincent. This expert was called by the defense in the double homicide case, gruesome death of 2 women, as well as the kidnapping and rape of a young girl. We were listening to the 911 call that young girl made, and she went to safety, thankfully, to some great law enforcement efforts. And then that's where the corpses were found inside of the home. I'm thinking it's pretty compelling testimony, and I'm not sure that this expert, in fact, I am eminently confident this expert did nothing to change the death penalty equation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think he did anything to help the defense here as far as getting Shawn Grate off of the death penalty. I think the prosecution did an amazing case and just kind of discrediting what this guy said. He talked about ADHD. He talked about some cannabis thing where he's addicted to cannabis. Of course, any defense is going to try to throw on, oh, he came from a bad home. We always hear that in court. He came from a bad home. But listen, people come from bad homes, Bob, every day. That doesn't mean they go out and kidnap, rape, murder 2 people, and stay in the house with the bodies.
Right, and actually the prosecutor made that point. We were talking about this and before we go back, and we're going to do some analysis here, but we're going to do a little bit more of that victim testimony because it was so riveting and compelling, and I think that's going to drive the bus here. But you're right. I mean, if you're going to explain a guy like this, you really need, in my opinion, the jury needs to hear something like this guy is like literally had a horrible life. I mean, I've had cases where they have presented compelling testimony of physical abuse, sexual abuse, repeated instances of a lack of care. You could see it as a prosecutor yourself why the person wound up being a quote-unquote bad guy, and you would just try to work around that. We have a 10-minute recess that's going on here, Vincent, so I do agree with your opinion while we're analyzing this that it's got to be compelling, and the prosecutor did a really good job in breaking down the fact, and I got all my notes all over here. I feel like I'm back on trial again. He's not insane. Did no drug history, alcohol history of mom and dad. He went through the social history. He did the things the expert didn't. Okay, I guess I'm not really sure what's happening in court right now. Something in my ear came on, but I'm not. Is he giving? Okay, so what we're learning from the producers, the excellent producers here at Law&Crime, is that the defendant has chose not to give a statement, also known as allocution in the law. So you understand this. He has a right to give a statement under oath, not under oath, or not at all. If he gives it under oath, then he can be subject to cross-examination of the defense, of the prosecuting attorney. If he decides to not give it under oath, the prosecuting attorney is allowed to present rebuttal evidence against anything he may say, or he can choose not to give a statement at all. He chose not to give a statement. Vincent Hill, what do you think is the impact of not speaking to the jury? Don't you think they want to hear from him?
I think they do, but at this point, what can he say? I mean, midway through this trial, he pled guilty to some of the charges, 15 of the 23 charges that he was indicted for, which included the kidnapping, the tampering with the corpse, the burglary, the rapes. I mean, at this point, what can he say to that jury that's going to make them? If I was a juror, there's nothing this guy could say that would make me say, you know what, maybe your life should be spared. I mean, keep in mind, there's 2 families without daughters right now. There's another victim, Jane Doe, who will be forever traumatized by this. What do you say?
Well, you know, listen, our producers are so great at the show that if there's anything, and I know that people are seeing that are watching this online, a lot of court activity, but just like you saw right now, if there's something that is going to happen that is relevant, we certainly will get that to you. Right now, it's just kind of clean up stuff that they're doing because pretty much, in my mind, this case has ended as far as testimony is concerned, given that the defendant had made a decision not to allocute in the case. Well, you know something, Vincent, Vincent Hill, our law enforcement expert, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I find it odd for 2 reasons. One, he was so willing to discuss all of his crimes almost in a braggadocious fashion to so many people before and seemed to want so much publicity. And the reason why I would recommend as a lawyer that he do it, and again, there's probably not much he can do, is I don't think that he's going to get a jury to spare his life unless he says something that's really compelling, even as much as I feel like I'm a complete horrible human being for what I did, and I don't want to be executed so I can be tortured with life in prison for my whole life, or whatever the story is going to be. Humanize himself to a certain extent so you may get that one juror that says, gosh, I just can't push the button on the guy. What do you think about that? I mean, would that have been a strategy?
Possibly, but here's the problem. It's hard to make yourself this caring human when this jury watched videos of him showing detectives how he choked these 2 women out. You know, he videotaped rapes of his victims. It's hard to say, oh, please see me as a human, please spare my life, when the jury watched that. I mean, it was like watching a horror movie. You know, when you looked at that, when you looked at this detective, the detective himself looked like he was in fear when Shawn Grate was demonstrating how he choked his victims out. So, you know, it's kind of hard to convince a jury that his life needs to be spared.
Yeah, I don't disagree. The defense is between a proverbial, one of the most proverbials, you all know what I'm going to say, rock and a hard place in terms of representing a client I've ever seen in my career. Hey, listen, we're going to come back on the other side with either analysis or what is going on in the court if it's important. On the other side of this break, thank you to the Law and Crime Network viewers as well as our Sirius XM listeners. And if you guys have any questions, now's the time to do it because I'm going to be getting off pretty soon. And I thank you so much for the support that you've given me online as well as the questions. They've been very insightful. We'll be back on the other end of the break. Welcome back to our Law and Crime viewers and our Sirius XM listeners. We are close to the closing statements that are about to occur in court, which we'll get to you as soon as they occur in the Shawn Grate trial. This is the case where he was convicted of a double homicide as well as a brutal and horrific kidnapping and rape from a courageous woman that called 911 and some courageous law enforcement officers that eventually took Shawn Grate down, found those rotting corpses, and here we are. The jury's going to make a decision. It's Judgment Day, if you will, in this case. I say that because Shawn Grate essentially manipulated this young lady who survived and testified with the use of the Bible and her attempts to try to Christianize him or give him the word of the Lord, taking the Bible away and saying, you're not going anywhere. And then after sexually assaulting and brutalizing her, saying, have you had enough yet? And it just got worse from there. I'm with Vincent Hill, our law enforcement expert. I got to let you guys know, for our viewers, I am going at the end of this, whether we go back to testimony or we go to another break, I'm going to be leaving you for this show. Vincent will be taking over after that in the hosting position. It was great being with you. I thank all the online people for all of your gracious comments as well as your questions. They were really insightful and really directs me and helps me give you better service. So we're eventually going to throw, at a certain point, Vincent, and I want to know your opinion about this, to Grate's sister. Now, this is definitely something that death penalty defense lawyers would like to do, is create this great no pun intended, plethora of witnesses that could be sympathetic, that are close to the defendant and testify on his behalf. Her name is Barbara Charter. But like you said, I mean, did anything really come out here in your mind that was going to be that wow factor to really pause any juror with regard to his heinous and horrific acts, especially after that great cross-examination by the prosecutor of their expert?
In my mind, Bob, absolutely nothing that he says or his family says would change my mind, steer me away from what I would feel I would need to do, would be to put Shawn Grate to death in the state of Ohio. I mean, again, if you look at the brutality of this case in not only the rapes, but who stays in a house that you've broken into with 2 dead bodies, like, it's just a piece of meat in the freezer. Who does that? To come back now and say, well, please don't put me to death. Please allow me to try to appeal this, or somehow get out on a technicality. No.
Right, especially when the psychologist really can't point to any significant mental diminution in any way. It just is a guy who's made a choice, the way I see it, who wanted to do evil carnage to people. It's bad stuff. Hey, listen, folks, again, it was a pleasure being on with you. I can't wait to be back again. Thank you so much, Vincent. Thank you for your great analysis, and good luck going forward on the hosting piece. I'm going to be cutting out for now, but continue to listen to, of course, our SiriusXM listeners, and as well as our Law and Crime. You got to love this station. You got murder, you got mayhem, you got it all. And listen, while it's not happy subjects, as a prosecutor, I'll tell you what what my older prosecutor told me when I was a young assistant prosecutor. You may not get paid a lot of money to do what it is we do in government service, and that is both of us, Vincent. But in the bottom line, the entertainment value, the humanity of it, everything that you see, while it's not always good, certainly isn't always good, it certainly makes for interesting watching and listening. So thank you to the viewers and listeners for tuning in. I'll see you shortly, and if at the other end of this we don't see something in court, we're going to go back to that sister's testimony, and you guys make the decision. Is this going to win the day for Shawn Grate? I say no. Thank you very much.